Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Hay Group's Sales Compensation webinar. My name is Larissa Stefanishin, and I am part of Hay Group's team in Philadelphia. I'd like to let you know that today's webinar is in listen-only mode, and we encourage you to send your questions through the chat feature at the bottom left of your screen. We will be reviewing your questions at the end of the presentation. Also, please note that you can maximize your screen in the upper right-hand corner to make the slides easier to read. Today's call is scheduled for an hour. We will spend about half the time going through the presentation and leaving the rest of the time for any questions that come in through the chat. Lastly, please know that all attendees will receive a copy of today's presentation. The presentation is being recorded and will be available in the next few days on our site. Today's presenters are Michael Vaccaro, Tom Hill, and Chris Harrington. Michael Vaccaro is a senior consultant in Hay Group's sales effectiveness practice based in New York. His focus is on sales force effectiveness, sales compensation, and their alignment with client strategic initiatives. Tom Hill is a senior consultant in Hay Group's sales effectiveness practice based in Chicago. Tom leads a number of the sales plan design and compensation engagements for clients on a U.S. and a global basis. Chris Harrington has been working with Hay Group since 2009 and is the sector leader for the Sales Compensation Report within Hay Group's Productized Services Division. Based out of our Hay Group Philadelphia office, Chris works to ensure that the Sales Compensation Survey and report delivery are in line with client specification and needs. Now, I'd like to pass it over to Michael to start us off.
Thank you, and hello to everyone out in the audience today. Let's go to the agenda page. Want to work through these 4 points today. As I pointed out, we'll have some Q&A at the end of the day. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is a bit on what we have seen in the sales compensation world over the last couple of years, and perhaps what we might be seeing in the coming year as we turn to 2014. Then later on, Tom will cover some of the general industry trends that we have seen in our own data as we've gone through that and talk through some of the specifics. And then we'll cover the actual plan design and practices survey and some of the points there and participation points that people might be interested to do that. So I can move on. So first of all, just by way of a quick introduction to Hay Group's enterprise sales effectiveness practice. Really, the root thought behind how we approach the world of sales and sales compensation is that everything in the sales organization needs to be aligned appropriately in order for a sales team to be effective. So while there are a lot of compensation elements to what's going to help a team be successful, it's really got to be aligned with everything else in terms of the roles that folks are playing, the way that sales work, the sorts of customer segments that and how they buy, and then supported appropriately through what management is doing, through the learning and development, through the hiring. All these things come together to drive in an aligned and strong direction. And so some of that spirit infuses a lot of the work that we do around sales effectiveness with roles and plans and leadership development and so on. And of course, all this is underpinned with the proprietary databases that Hay has that really are second to none in the industry. But it's really more than the data. It's about how to use the data to drive your sales team forward. So after that quick infomercial, why don't I move to the first section here and talk a little bit about the previous couple of years and what we might be looking for going forward. So first of all, some of the challenges over the last couple of years. And I guess the first and overall point to make here is really it's been a tough couple of years to predict among many sales organizations. We've had this pattern, especially in 2011 and 2012, where there was a lot of optimism in the beginning of each of the year, and there was a swoon in the middle of the year, and then there was a little bit of returning optimism at the end of the year, and then that cycle would repeat itself for all sorts of reasons around the economic context. So there's been some ups and downs. that has made it very tough for many sales organizations to predict what they should be doing and how they should try to take advantage of the marketplace going forward. So going back to last year, as we were working with clients, a lot of the items that were covered about making sure pay and performance were linked, thinking about the customer and value proposition, all these really were how to do as much as we can with what we have, because there was some fear of making investments with any level of certainty, just because nobody really knew where things were going to be going overall. Interestingly, though, what we did not see is a focus on the costs of compensation, which may lead some to scratch their heads, but our take on that is that folks were, given that there had been uninspiring sales results in terms of folks meeting goals and those goals driving a lot of pay for the sales teams, folks weren't too concerned about overpaying given those conditions. And so costs were left pretty much well enough alone. We had a little bit of that same optimistic uptick coming into 2013. But again, it has been a focus more on the basic blocking and tackling that we've seen mostly. Alignment of go-to-market strategy to the incentive program. So again, more than just the benchmark data, but trying to move ourselves in a certain direction. Ensuring quotas were set properly, because it's been so danged hard over the last 3 or 4 years to do. And looking for ways to perhaps even decouple performance versus quota with pay results in such a strong fashion. Career paths, global alignment, all these are really very, very housekeeping oriented, but at the same time starting to think about laying the foundation for where things may end up. Notice on this list you still don't see compensation costs, again, kind of interesting, but again, a little bit of probably reflecting some uncertainty that's going on. We also haven't seen a greater leveraging going on, so pay mixes really haven't changed much in terms of plan designs, and the risk behind them of doing that really hasn't changed. So it's been a bit of a holding pattern in a lot of ways.
Hey, Michael, can I just add one point real quick?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of kind of to build on your point about looking at the go-to-market strategy instead of just the benchmark data, some of the things in addition to that is companies aren't just looking, when we say benchmark data, looking specific to their industry, but really trying to look at what other organizations outside of their industry are doing, kind of like the Southwest Airlines model. Southwest Airlines wanted to be great at customer service, but they didn't look at what other airlines were doing for customer service, because they weren't kind of the gold standard, so they looked outside the industry. So there is some of that. What are other organizations doing outside of what we typically see, to kind of give us some guidance on where we want to go as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. So does this have any implication for 2014 and what we are going to see? We think it does, certainly at least in the sense of the sorts of sales roles that people are starting to think about. We have had a lot of discussion over the last year, as noted, about new types of roles that manage relationships, that work within a team, that sell more than the product or the service, but offer a solution to the customer. Many of you might be aware that there was a Harvard Business Review article just this month that focused on the idea of insight selling from the Sales Conference Board. And a lot of attention is given to what a non-traditional sales approach might be. So we expect those trends to be continuing, but they may, on the comp side, still maintain a pay mix that doesn't change too much. But again, that pay needs to be considered in the context of the rest of the sales effectiveness issues, the career path, the direction, the customer demands that are going to be placed upon the sales organization. On the global side, or partly because of the global trend as well in sales comp design, there's more pressure than there usually has been to keep plans as simple as possible, which might be a little bit of a contradiction in a complex global world. But the less complexity folks can have in their sales plan means more ability to reflect what's going on in the local markets and try to have the right things that are in common across the globe and the right things that are tailored for each of the local markets there. Over. So in that spirit, part of what we do to look at different sales roles and what the right compensation might be is think about the traditional 2x2 here laid out for different sorts of roles that might be appropriate. On the y-axis, I think most people would be familiar with the old hunter-farmer distinction among their sales roles. That is, hunters who are going out to find new business and close deals, farmers who are there to maintain relationships and expand them over time. So that's certainly still a valid distinction across sales roles. On the x-axis, there's also this idea of a transactional sales approach versus a consultative sales approach, as I noted in that HBR article, for example. The interesting thing, though, is that all of these are going to have some applicability, depending very much on the market context that each company has, based upon what the value proposition that company is bringing to its customers. Not every role needs to be consultative. Not every role needs to be a hunter necessarily. All of these will have some good applicability. Each will have a plan design that makes sense, and really the trick is to decide which one is going to serve the customer base and the sales model best. Maybe multiple applications may be brought together in a single sales organization as well. The other point to note here is that relative to total comp as a trend, these may not necessarily have a big difference in terms of what that total comp target will be. It just may be that the pay bits, the pay mechanics, are divided a little bit differently, say between commission or bonus, between retention and between new business. Whatever it might be, the number may add up to the same thing. The art will be in dividing up the pieces a little more appropriately for the particular role. So if you were to think about these items in your own sales teams, again, the idea for us that we would draw from and we would emphasize for the folks out there is to think about all of these in an integrated manner. Not just whether the comp plan makes sense or it mechanically works, but to make sure that it's driving the sales team in the right direction for the business's strategy, that it's aligned with how we manage and how our roles are put together, and that we can actually track and administer it correctly. So the 8 questions here around process and strategy and roles and management, all of them are relevant when thinking about what sort of comp design makes sense as we go into 2014. With that, we'll dig a little bit deeper into those overall trends with Tom.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. So to get us started, our 2013 Sales Compensation Plan Design and Practices Survey collected data from over 400 organizations. And specific to the plan design section, we were able to collect data from 259 organizations in a number of sectors, which you see here: the beer, wine, and spirits, chemicals, fast-moving consumer goods, health insurance, industrial, insurance and financial services, and energy. Focus is going to be on the general market, so the aggregated market of these sectors, as well as aggregated data for the roles themselves. the survey itself does have data specific to 8 unique sales roles. Okay. So in terms of plan design, data here is presented for 7 of those roles. You can see we have 2 different types of sales incentive plans we see. The first is a performance-based bonus, which is often a targeted bonus or a scorecard bonus, sometimes referred to as, as well as those offering commission. But what we see in terms of plan design or plan type for these roles is that a majority of organizations are using a performance-based bonus approach, and we're seeing a decreasing emphasis on commission plans. Though commission plans are still fairly popular for your sales rep, hunter type of territory manager position. As you might suspect, organizations with more of a transactional selling model tend to use commission plans more frequently. You also notice that the totals don't sum up to 100, and that's because many organizations for sales roles will have some of the incentive tied to a bonus, and then another portion tied to a commission plan. And while it's not reflected in the data here, because this is just organizations that are using a sales incentive plan, we often find that sales management positions and sales director positions are kind of that bleeding edge on whether those employees will be on a sales incentive plan or on more of a corporate-based bonus plan, tied to corporate measures with some specifics tied back to their team. But what's interesting here is, as I mentioned, some of the traditional models of paying salespeople are changing. We recently worked with one property and casualty insurance, which is very much a transactional sale, and they wanted us to help them shift away from commissions for their sales managers to more of a bonus plan. The industry itself within P&C insurance uses override commissions heavily to pay sales managers. So an override is basically a percent or a cut that the sales manager gets based on how all the sales reps or agents on their team do. But what they had found, this organization, was that the commission plans were paying out mostly due to past success. Since premiums were often renewed, the renewals kind of came in. There wasn't a lot of new business attraction that they were wanting to get. So they found that a bonus arrangement better suited their needs, since they wanted the plan to focus on growth, agency profitability, and hiring and developing managers, or hiring and developing sales agents. And I think this gets back to Michael's point earlier about the go-to-market strategy versus the benchmarks. So if you were to look just at what the benchmarks say, they would say, well, in this industry or this type of job, we do X. But really you need to marry that up and consider that with where do you need to go as an organization. Okay, so next slide. In terms of elasticity, so elasticity is the relationship between payout and performance. So the more you perform, the higher the level of payout. You can see that we have data here for the threshold level of performance, which is the minimum amount of performance that's required before a payout begins, and then the maximum. We would assume, and our data says this too, that the target performance and the target payout are 100% and 100%. So you can see we have median information, average information, and then a range high and low. I'll focus on the median data here. But we see for a threshold performance of 80% will pay out 50% of the incentive target. This has actually been very consistent year over year, that most organizations are setting a policy one way or the other at 80% of goal will pay out half of the incentive. And our data bared that out again this year. When we look at maximum performance, in past years, the performance level stayed around at 150% or so, but the payout amount increased this year from 200%, while in the years past it was around 130, 150%. So we did see a bit of an upswing there in terms of the level of upside that's in these plans. I think one thing we note is that we tend to see, less upside in plans where there's more of a team aspect to it or a management than it would for individual contributors. The reason being that teams and managers can often be buoyed by a few strong performers that help get everyone to a certain goal, and those positions tend to be a bit more stable as well. Lastly, those roles are designed less to develop and execute strategy and not to close deals. So that's why we tend to see less upside in those. But really, kind of the last kind of key takeaway here is when you're thinking about where to set your performance levels, it is partially dependent on how tight you feel that your goal-setting process is. So, looking back at past performance of performance versus goals and targets can kind of give you some guidance there. But obviously, the rule of thumb is the less comfortable you are with that end number, that goal, kind of the wider distance you should have for a performance threshold to get people into the game. Okay. Next slide. Talking about here plan components and plan measures. So plan components is basically how we measure the measures. So is a revenue measure based on someone's individual performance? Is it based on some type of business unit or other type of roll-up? And what we found here is individual performance remains heavy emphasis. This is prevalence data we're presenting here. There continues to be a devotion to some broader organization goals and objectives in sales incentive plans. So it's not all just about how Sally did in her territory, but some type of common fate measures. And you can see that takes many different forms, whether that's on a business unit or region measure or a higher rolled up number in terms of country performance or global performance. In terms of the measures, we collect about 30 different measures in our survey. We've kind of listed some of the more popular ones here. And keep in mind this data in the survey is broken out by industry, sector, and role. So there will be much more differentiation. One example is beer, wine, and spirits has a heavy use of the depletions measure. So that is in the survey. But we collect data on the 30 measures, high use of and prevalence of use of a revenue measure and a profit measure or a profit measure. Find that organizations prefer to use a profit measure if they can. Oftentimes they find it's either hard to track that on an individual basis or that's proprietary information they don't want kind of out in the market, if you will. This year, we did see units become the third most popular measure. It replaced other, which has had a higher prevalence in years past. We're not sure if this is quite an anomaly. Other had been the third most, around 30% for the past few years. So we'll just have to wait and see and watch that a little bit. Okay, next slide. In terms of commission design, we have two tables here we're presenting. The first is what sort of mechanism are we using to administer and and pay out our commissions, and the second is what type of design are we doing in terms of the commission rate. So first, in terms of the commission rate, companies can choose in the survey to select both quota and a straight commission, so that's why it doesn't sum to 100. But kind of the general rule of thumb here is that if you have more of a transactional sale, you're more likely to have a straight commission, whereas if you have a heavy emphasis on a base salary in terms of the total cash, you'll want to use commissions to ensure you're getting some bang for your buck before you start paying out incentives. You also see there's a fairly even split in the usage of flat plan design and a design that has a bit more of an accelerator on it. Obviously, those accelerators are more useful when you're trying to drive incremental sales, but they do carry some risk in terms of potential for windfall payouts or things beyond your control that you then pay at a much higher rate. Next slide. In terms of performance results, took a look here back in the past 3 years of data, and it was fairly consistent. So what we saw here is aggregated based on the reps here, 4 different performance levels. So level of salespeople that perform below threshold, level of salespeople who perform between that threshold and target, between target and 1.5 times target, and then maximum. But generally, the population is about 15% are not achieving enough success to have some sort of payout in the plan. About 40% or so over the years have been receiving a payout somewhere between threshold, and threshold doesn't necessarily need to be that 80%, mind you, and target. And then a slightly lower percent, kind of in the 35 up to 40% between target and 1.5 times, and then just a few high performers achieving max of the plan. One thing Michael had mentioned earlier was that many organizations have been trying to simplify plans, and what we found in our research and in our client work is that when organizations do simplify the plan, it is easier for the sales reps to focus on what's important and achieve higher levels of performance against those goals. Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael to share some closing thoughts on trends and the survey before we have Chris jump in.
Sure, Tom. And I think the first line here in closing thoughts just continues where your direction had been, which is focusing on simplicity and the result. Far be it for consultants to usually want to complicate things. We actually take the opposite tack and try to think hard about how to keep things as simple and straightforward and focused on the end outcome as they possibly can be. So are there things that would help the sales team by pruning them out of the plan or by making more measures look the same as other measures within the plan? These are things that are only going to help the sales team get their heads around what it is that they actually need to do. So fewer measures, focusing on the end results, thinking about how it links to the strategy for a particular channel or how the different channels need to interact or be integrated. That's going to be the pressure against keeping it simple, is making sure that we can handle these complexities in a fairly consistent way. But then the last point here, incentives need to fit how you create value. In other words, be true to yourself. The external equity is important in terms of the benchmarking, but the internal alignment of how the plan fits what the business is all about is really going to be the most important thing to getting effectiveness. I think that's always been true, and I see no reason to expect it not to be true next year as well. So keep it simple, but at the same time, keep it real. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Michael and Tom. So in the last few minutes here, before we get into the questions that those of you submitted through the chat function, we wanted to talk a little bit about the 2013 Hay Group Sales Compensation Survey. The report was published around a month ago and is now currently available for purchase. You'll see 2013 as it breaks out below here. We had participation from more than 300 general industry organizations, and you'll see how the sector breakout is below. The industrial sector there is made up of high manufacturing, low manufacturing, and consumer durables organizations. Fast-moving consumer goods is a breakout of consumer products, food, beverage, beauty, and cosmetics companies. The sales compensation report is available in 2 parts. The first part of the report is a practices, policies, and plan design section. That is useful for sales compensation professionals as they tweak and update their plans on a year-to-year basis. You'll see the different sections of this report laid out below. Everything from Salesforce and annual incentive eligibility to sales cycle length to plan components and the various metrics and measures in any given plan. And then the second part of the sales compensation report is what we like to term the meat and potatoes part of the report. This is the traditional Excel compensation job tables aspect of the report. It'll include breakouts on general industry as well as 7 different industry segments that were listed previously. The report will contain information on 35 positions, and these are levels that go through the operational suite such as sales administrators and sales support staff all the way up through the executive level, sales directors, sales VPs, head of sales, and chief sales officers. The data is available across 20 different compensation elements, everything from base salary all the way to total direct compensation, and you'll see the listing of those elements below. So the next question that some of you may be asking is how you can go about participating in our annual survey. In order to participate in the survey, we ask organizations to fill out the traditional Excel-based data submission kit that we send to all of our clients, as well as completing the online piece of the U.S. Policies and Practices questionnaire. And this online piece is where we collect information on plan design changes. And of course, for more information about purchasing the 2012 report or the 2013 report and participating in our future surveys, please do contact your Hay Group account manager or myself, Michael, Tom Hill, or Mark Wallace. Final survey details. The cost is $3,000, and you'll see what it includes below. And Tom, if you want to talk a little bit about the bundled offering of consulting and the survey.
Sure, Chris. So last year we came out, we're continuing again this year, a bundled offering. We often find that organizations don't necessarily need a big, broad plan design, but they want the benchmarking data, which is great, but they want a little help and guidance on maybe where the plan can be improved, and that's what this bundled offering is designed to do. So you get the survey at a reduced rate and get some consulting support from Michael, myself, or someone else on our team to do an audit of 2 plans. So we collect some information, make sure we understand how your plans work. We assess the plan against 21 different criteria that we see from leading organizations. So these are things like communication, use of hurdles, ROI, philosophy, that sort of thing. We'll also then do a deeper cut of the survey as well to provide some additional insights, and then put together our report and findings of here are the things we think you should focus on to improve the plan, and here's a roadmap for how to get there. So it's a nice kind of quick and easy way to get you what you need. Thanks, Chris.
And then the last slide here is just a brief Hay Group commercial. Hay Group Activate is a suite of apps that was released actually yesterday. Hay Group will be releasing apps for purchase in February and March. We have 3 different apps, a Grade a Job app, a Price a Job app, and also a Leadership Styles and Climate app, which will be great for sales compensation professionals as well as sales managers. To learn more about our latest products, please visit us at www.atrium.haygroup.com/US. And now I'll pass it over to Larissa, who has been collecting some of the questions that some of the participants have been posing throughout the webinar.
Michael, Tom, and Chris for going through the presentation. Now, before we get to your questions, there are a few questions that we have for you. So the first question is if you would like additional information about sales compensation. So I'll give you just a little bit to check off yes or no. And the second question we have for you is just to check off any of the categories of pay, talent, effectiveness, and Hay Group Activate that you would like to learn more information on. Thank you, everybody, for your responses. I want to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and you will receive a copy of the slides. It will be posted to our website within the next few days. Now I'll begin to review the questions that came in through the chat. And we have a good amount of questions that came in. So starting with the first question is, has the general mood improved among sales organizations?
I'll take that one.
Michael, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll do that. So I talked a lot about the ups and downs in 2011 and 2012 and 2013 that folks have seemed to be going through almost psychologically. I have to say the optimism feels a lot stronger now than it did. There seems to be a little more willingness among our clients to put some money behind some growth. So, for example, just yesterday, in meeting with a client, we were talking about how to quickly expand their sales force by 10%, and that's not the sort of discussion I had really been having over the last couple of years. So I'm getting this vibe of this time it's for real. 2014 could be the year that true growth starts to emerge, and some of the sales teams can start to think about how to plan for growth.
Thank you, Michael. Another question that came in is, I'm an HR manager and my company's sales organization develops and manages the incentive plan. How do other companies get their HR teams involved in the sales plan design aspect? Tom, you want to take that one?
Sure, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I mean, I think it starts with you fulfilling your role within HR and being that business partner or advisor, so supporting what they're doing. And then I think from there, you would kind of build, where I've seen it successful for individuals, builds to providing some benchmarking in terms of, here's what we see in the market, here's some other things organizations are doing, and then it builds further into some analysis on, here's some other things I saw based on the results that, kind of jumped out at me, and then trying to have those conversations is at the times where I kind of feel it works the best to become more of an integrated partner with that.
Thank you for that response. Next question we have are, what trends are you seeing on the global front?
I'll speak to that. So I mentioned during the first part of the discussion a lot of interest in trying to figure out how to build a global compensation plan. And in that sense, what are the things that should be standard across all parts of a global sales team, and to what level does it need to be customized to recognize local market conditions, or maybe what sort of point of development a particular local market is in. So it's a lot of the global discussion is how to strike that balance between a standard approach and one that could absorb a bit of local coloring to it as well, without making things too complex, as we've talked about a number of times. I'd also say that obviously China continues to be a hot topic, particularly because there are some incentive and pay traditions there that are a little bit different than what we see here in the U.S. And so some of the rules don't necessarily apply and have to be reconstituted a bit to serve Chinese clients and work with Chinese sales teams, such as the balance between base and variable pay. And the only other thing that sticks in my mind is there's increasing interest in the Middle East. I know we have had a couple of projects that have sent us out that way, and a couple of clients really interested in exploring how to adapt some of say, U.S. compensation practices or good principles into their sales teams as they build them up. Those are off the top of my head.
Yeah, Michael, maybe one other one I'm seeing, I think you kind of spoke to this a bit with the local market conditions, is it's less about the type of plan in that market, and more about, from the ones I've done, more about the mix of pay that gets differentiated in the countries than saying, having a bonus plan kind of consistent throughout. I think that kind of gets back to what we were talking about, the global trends where it's kind of centralizing plans. It's just one of the things to kind of throw out there for our audience.
Okay, thank you. Tom, how about you take this question? What are some of the differences you see in terms of pay mix?
Well, I think generally, the survey definitely has a lot of details on this. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think kind of the key differentiator is jobs that are doing more of that hunting, more transactional focused jobs tend to have a higher leverage. So in other words, they tend to have less of the total cash on base and more of that on variable pay. So if we kind of look back at the roles specific to our survey, we'd say that business developer role and sometimes that inside sales role have a higher level of variable pay as part of their total cash, whereas those key account manager jobs are often roles that are servicing obviously your most important client, and they're focused on longer-term deals, cross-selling. Those jobs tend to have less pay at risk than some of those other hunter roles. Michael, anything from your perspective on that?
I think you covered it, Tom.
Okay, great.
Great. Another question we have, Michael, how about you take this one? Any innovative design ideas you have seen this year?
Well, one thing that sticks in my mind is that, again, we talked a bit about how things have been sort of hard to predict on an economic front as we go, and how that has filtered into comp plans through the quotas, and quotas in turn figuring into how pay is determined for folks. Given that, and given that folks have kind of felt both sides of a market that's down and a market that's up, one of the more innovative ideas I've seen was almost moving to a relative ranking versus the overall performance of a company. So, for example, say a company thought it would grow 5% over a year, but things being what they are, maybe that overall growth is only 3%. Well, to the degree that that's not necessarily the sales team's fault or more the fault of the economic context, companies are thinking about, can you then therefore reward the folks that beat the overall average to a higher degree than the folks who only met it or perhaps fell behind? So they're not necessarily tied to that 3 to 5%. It's a little more of a relative performance ranking. Interestingly, I think you'd seen that a lot in pharma. But that idea is kind of spread out of that industry, and ironically, in pharma, they seem to be moving away from that to a certain degree and going more to more pure traditional measures, I guess, of revenue and share. So that's one that sticks in my mind. Tom, anything strike you?
Yeah, I think you covered the one I was going to contribute with. So
sorry about that.
No worries. That was good. So we're on the same page with that. That's great.
Okay, great. Thanks for tackling that question. Another question we have, Chris, how about you take this one, is what's the timing of the annual survey?
Sure. Thanks, Larissa. So the survey will be sent out to organizations in the middle of February. And we will keep the survey open and ask all interested organizations to wrap up their participation probably by the middle of June. For the organizations that are on the phone that are part of the typical and annual Hay Group survey season, you will have the opportunity to participate in the survey through the traditional survey that you've received. And that is the Excel-based survey as well as the link to the online policies and practices section of the survey. We just ask that you pay special attention to the sales compensation tab within the online survey and within the Excel-based survey and fill that out. The report, the 2014 report, will be published in the middle of September. And for organizations on the phone that are interested in getting their hands on the 2013 report, please do reach out to myself, Tom, Mark, or Michael, and we can chat with you and make sure that we can put that report in your hands.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you to Chris, Tom, and Michael for answering all the questions that came through. There are a few questions that we didn't get to, but don't worry, because Tom, Michael, and Chris will follow up with you. That concludes today's webinars, and if you have indicated that you wanted more information on any of our tools or sales compensation, a Hay Group representative will be in touch. If you need to reach out directly, please feel free to reach out to the presenters listed on the screen now. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.